Hello everyone, I'm your narrator from Grave Hush, and I'm here to help you unwind tonight. I know many of you use these stories to fall asleep. So before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where in the world are you listening from? And what time is it for you right now? Now get cozy, take a deep breath, let your body sink into the stillness. It's time to relax and let the story carry you into sleep. Our first story tonight. Let's begin. I ate my bully's soul. It all happened back in the 90s. I had just stepped into my teenage years, living in a tiny town in southern Nebraska with my parents and my baby sister, who was only 6 months old. That spring, I turned 13, and I was absolutely obsessed with everything fantasy. God, I was crazy about the Dragonlance books, every single one of them. Unfortunately, everyone at school knew this too well. As if it wasn't bad enough that I had strabismus and my left eye turned inward because of it. I don't even need to say it. I was pretty much a walking target at school. A scrawny, cross-eyed, glasses-wearing kid who loved fantasy novels. It wasn't just cliché. It was prime bully material. Yeah, school had its demons and they had it out for me. Sometimes I got off easy, tripping me in the hallway, tossing stuff at me, blowing spitballs. But other times it got much worse. They'd steal my clothes, shove me into puddles, or just beat the crap out of me. The biggest jerk of them all? That was Mitch, my classmate. He humiliated me in every way you can imagine. My glasses were broken more often than they were whole thanks to him. One time, he shoved me so hard I landed on my arm and broke it. I wore a cast for half a year. The worst part, no one ever helped. Most people just ignored it, looked away, or even laughed along with my bullies. And my parents, well, they were always busy. Dad was a traveling salesman, peddling shares for a tourism company anywhere he could. Mom hadn't been well since my baby sister was born. She spent most of her time in bed and only got up a few times a day. Friends? I couldn't even dream of having real ones. The only people I could call friends were strangers from AOL chat rooms. That was my life, growing up in that grimy little town. Until that Thursday afternoon. I had already been through a rough day and it was nowhere near over. After school, Mitch and a few other kids chased me down. They were on bikes. I had to run as fast as my legs would carry me. Of course, they caught up to me. I don't even remember where exactly. It was some empty lot with just one building on it, a crumbling old shed. Mitch and the others yanked my pants down and started beating my bare backside and legs with sticks. It hurt like hell, not just physically, but the shame of it too. When they were done, they tied my ankles together with a shoelace and locked me inside the shed. They jammed the door shut with sticks so I couldn't open it from the inside. I sat there for hours. Mitch and the rest had long since taken off, saying I should find a way out, or maybe they'd let me out tomorrow. It was late afternoon, and I was still sitting there in nothing but my underwear with my backside throbbing in pain. I covered my eyes and tried to imagine a better place. Somewhere no one could hurt me. Somewhere I could just go to school without being afraid. I hated all of them. But most of all, I hated Mitch. He was always the ringleader, the one who made sure I was the one everyone picked on. I was sitting alone in that little wooden shed when I heard something. A sound. Strange, like someone giggling. My first thought was, great, another one of Mitch's goons. But this was different. It sounded distant somehow. I peeked through the cracks in the wooden boards, hoping to spot whoever it was, but there was no one out there. Still, I could have sworn someone was walking around the shed. So I called out, "Please help, I'm stuck in here. Please, can you open the door?" No answer. Just that same giggling again, but this time, it wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside, from behind me. My whole body froze in fear. What the hell was this? What was in here with me? Slowly, I turned to look, and that's when I saw it. A tall black figure, blacker than tar and swirling like smoke with glowing red embers flickering inside the haze. It had no face, or if it did, I couldn't see it. But it had hands and feet. It just stood there, staring at me with its faceless body. I couldn't say a word. I thought I might die right then and there from sheer terror. But then the smoke-like man spoke. Help. First cannon. Maybe. Help. I stood there staring at it, seeing clearly that it had no mouth, no way to speak. And yet I heard its voice like a whisper right inside my ear. Still, I said nothing. My bare little legs trembled with fear. The thing just stared at me without eyes. Or maybe it wasn't even looking at me, I couldn't tell. Then it whispered again. Saw. Everything. First saw. Help. If. Want. I didn't know what to say. How could something like this possibly help me? What even was it? And what had it seen? I was just a dumb kid, but then it hit me. It must have seen what Mitch and the others had done to me. Maybe it wanted to help. With that, I don't know why I did it, or maybe I was just that desperate, but I nodded. Yes, I wanted its help. The smoke creature leaned in closer. I shrank back in fear, but my back hit the shed wall. There was nowhere left to go. It whispered again. Help, not. Free need from you. I stared at the thing, terrified. Sometimes it looked like a man, sometimes like shapeless smoke. I didn't understand what it needed from me, but I said the words it was waiting for. I'll help you, if you help me get rid of Mitch. It didn't say anything, just kept swirling, watching. Then after a moment, it whispered again right next to my ear. Help, soul, 3, just say, offer, you, I didn't really understand what it meant. I was just a scared, panicking little kid, not exactly thinking clearly. So I just nodded again, as if I understood. Then the creature's black, smoky hand grabbed mine. It felt like searing hot iron touching my skin. It burned a mark into my wrist. I screamed in pain, the stench of scorched flesh instantly hitting my cold nose. Just say, you, first offer, Fumali's. I collapsed to the ground as it let go of my arm. It hurt more than anything Mitch and the others had ever done to me. This wasn't just pain, it had branded me. A dark bruise appeared instantly around my wrist, like something unimaginably strong had crushed it. I stared at my throbbing hand. In my palm, a strange triangle-shaped symbol was now burned into the flesh. That's when the shed door suddenly burst open. A man stood there, an older guy. I didn't know his name, but my dad had talked to him many times in town. Jesus, kid, what the hell are you doing here? What happened to you? He said, panicked. I turned back toward the smoke creature, but it was already gone. Not even a trace of it remained. The old man walked me home. My parents were completely shocked. Or, well, mostly my dad was. Mom hadn't gotten out of bed all day. She wasn't feeling well. Dad said he'd talk to Mitch's parents, but not now. He was flying to Minneapolis for a business trip the next day, so he'd deal with it next week. I cleaned myself up a little and tried to go into my parents' bedroom to talk to Mom, but she just sat there on the edge of the bed, staring blankly into nothing. The moment I walked in, Izzy, my baby sister, started wailing in her crib. She still slept in their room. Dad came in and sent me out. He said, "Let's not have more chaos tonight. Just go to your room." Honestly, and that was for the best. I stayed up reading late into the night, but tomorrow was Friday, and school. God, I hated school. Friday went by surprisingly okay. No one messed with me in the morning. Maybe they figured what happened yesterday was enough. Or maybe they were planning something worse. Dad didn't talk to Mitch's parents. He didn't have time. I didn't expect anything else. During lunch break, I sat outside in the yard. I always preferred eating where no one could see me. A quiet place where I could also read. I was reading The Second Generation, the one Dad bought me a few weeks ago during one of his business trips. When I looked up, I saw Mitch walking toward me from the cafeteria. My stomach clenched. Even the sight of that dumb, long blonde hair of his made me sick. He walked right up to me, smacked the book out of my hands, and sneered, "What you readin', little rat? Didn't I tell you to stay in the shed till morning?" I didn't say a word. I'd learned it was better to just stay quiet and let it pass. "What happened to your hand, booger boy? Did you pick too many boogers?" Mitch kept going. He was alone, but you'd think he was still trying to impress an audience like the other kids were standing there laughing. I just kept staring at the ground, silent. He kept taunting me. "You're pathetic, Four Eyes, your whole family is. My mom says your mom's defective and she's right." Then he shoved me hard, knocking me off the bench and onto the ground. I just lay there, waiting for the usual beating to come. But then I heard the giggle. The sound was familiar. From yesterday, the smoke. And then I heard the whisper again. "Just say, first offer, him, to, you, Fumali's." This time it wasn't just me who was surprised, Mitch was too. Because I stood up from the ground. "What the fuck are you doing, loser?" Mitch yelled. But I didn't even seem to hear him. I just stared at him, part angry, part confused. He lunged to punch me. That was his rule, after all. If he was around, I was supposed to be on the ground. But I beat him to it, and 3 words came out of my mouth. "I offer him to you, Fumali's." It was like I knew exactly what I was doing, or what would happen next. Mitch didn't hit me, he just stared at me blankly, not really understanding what the hell I was doing. And then blood began trickling from his nose. His face went pale. He looked terrified, something was clearly wrong. Then he just collapsed backward like a sack of bricks and started convulsing violently like a seizure. Blood and foamy spit flew from his mouth, and it began pouring from his nose, ears, and even his eyes. His arms bent back at impossible angles like something had twisted them. I froze in fear, just standing there in shock, completely silent. I was only a kid. I didn't know what to do. But then, something started happening to me too. It felt like a crushing weight was pressing against my chest. Like an asthma attack, I could barely breathe, staring up at the sky, completely frozen. It only lasted seconds, but when it was over, I felt awful. I was dizzy, and it felt like something was eating me up from the inside. Mitch was lying there. He was still breathing, but his face was soaked in blood, and his eyes had gone gray, like he'd gone blind. His body looked lifeless. All I knew was that I had to get out of there, so I ran back toward the school, terrified. They took Mitch away in an ambulance that same day. I didn't say a word to anyone. I wasn't sure if I had done that to him or if something had just gone wrong with him. But honestly, it was better not to think about it. At least he was gone. My weekend went better than usual. I got to go out biking, even got some ice cream. Mom didn't do much. Either stayed in bed or took care of Izzy, but she didn't say a word to me. Guilt gnawed at me every time I thought about Mitch, and part of me was scared Mom somehow knew something, and that's why she wasn't speaking to me. But I pushed the thought away. There were times she wouldn't speak to Dad for weeks. So maybe it was just one of those times. Mitch's incident shook the whole town. The doctors said he'd had some kind of brain hemorrhage and was in a coma. They didn't think he'd ever be a normal kid again. I heard it at the ice cream shop. 2 middle-aged women were gossiping about it like it was a soap opera. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me was glad Mitch was gone. Now the other kids weren't bullying me either. But at the same time, the image of Mitch lying there on the ground haunted me. I dreamed about it 2 nights in a row now. I felt like a horrible person, but also kind of happy. It was already Sunday night. I think it might have been the most peaceful weekend of my life. There had never been a weekend when Mitch didn't come after me or torment me in some way. Dad came home from his trip, but he was tired, so we didn't talk much. He just went straight to bed. I stayed up a bit longer to read. Dragonlance again. Honestly, I don't think I could have survived those years without those books. The house was quiet, peaceful. That's when I felt it, that strange sensation. Someone giggled. The hairs stood up on the back of my neck. The little bedside lamp I was reading under dimmed, flickering, until the whole room was almost dark. I wanted to bolt, to just run. But then a black figure materialized in the corner of my room. It was the smoke creature again. Terrified, I yanked the blanket over my head. I knew what it was, but its presence still chilled me to the bone. Then I heard that familiar whisper. 2 more. Mark. Needs 2 more. I didn't really understand at first. It was always hard to make out what it meant. Its voice was quiet and metallic, like an echo that scraped along your skull. Then I noticed my hand. The brand it had burned into me was still there, but one of the triangle's corners was gone. It now looked like a simple L shape. The missing part of the burn had vanished completely, as if it was never there. The whisper came again. I helped. Me. 2. Help. Needs. 2. My young mind struggled to process it, but finally I understood and froze. It wanted me to do it again, twice more, what I'd done to Mitch. I shook my head. Number. There was no way I was doing anything like that again. I would never forget Mitch's gray, lifeless eyes. The creature suddenly seemed angry. You couldn't really see it on its empty black face, but its shape trembled and the red ember-like sparks inside it began to glow brighter. And then the whispering turned horrific. It was as if 1,000 people were screaming inside my head. I covered my ears to shut it out, but it wasn't a sound I could block. It wasn't outside my head, it was inside. I waved my hands, desperately pleading for it to stop before I went mad. Then the whispering returned to its usual tone. 2 more. By Thursday. 2 more. My face turned pale. Thursday? There had been no deadline before. I swallowed hard, then, gathering all my courage, one whispered back as quietly as I could, making sure no one in the house could hear me. What do you mean by Thursday? You never said anything about that. The creature didn't answer. It just stood there in the corner between my wardrobe and the wall. But the whisper came, again the same as before. Thursday, 2. Souls. Orient yours. I went sheet white. This was getting worse. Now even my soul was in danger. Suddenly my bedroom door burst open. Dad walked in. He said he thought he'd heard someone walking around and wanted to check on everyone. But the black smoke thing was already gone from the corner. Monday started terribly. There was such pressure on me, I swear I was on the verge of passing out. I had to do that thing to 2 more people by Thursday. And Mitch had already shattered me, and I hated Mitch. What would happen if I did it to someone who didn't even deserve it? During class, I couldn't focus on anything. All I could think about was the debt I owed the smoke thing. What the hell was I supposed to do? It was lunch break again, and for once I actually got to eat in peace. No one was messing with me. At least, that's what I thought. I sat in my usual spot, one of the benches out in the yard, eating my tuna sandwich when someone approached me. It was the school janitor, an old guy who looked like he hated the world, never spoke to anyone unless he was yelling at some dumb kid for being out of line. He just stood there, squinting at me with sharp eyes. I had no idea what he wanted, so I just politely greeted him. Then he finally spoke, and the moment he did, all the blood drained from my body. I saw what you did. I just sat there, pale as a ghost, staring up at the old man. What did he mean? What did he see? Was I going to prison or something worse? I tried to lie, tried to fake it. Maybe he'd believe me and go away. I don't know what you mean, I said quietly. He just kept staring at me, eyes like knives. Then he repeated it. I know what you did, you little shit. I saw it from the window when you were out here with that other boy. I didn't know what to do. What the hell could I do? This old man was going to expose me, and my life would be over. As if being forced to collect souls for some smoke demon wasn't enough, now I had this guy on my back too. Just then the bell rang. Recess was over and my teacher was already calling us back inside. I tried to slip away without saying a word, pretending I hadn't heard him. But the janitor grabbed my wrist and looked me dead in the eyes, furious. What did you do to him? What are you, some kind of alien? I yanked my hand out of his grip and ran back inside the school. He just stood there watching me run. But I could tell from his face this wasn't over. I rushed to my desk and sat down, rubbing the spot on my wrist where he'd grabbed me, of course. It was that wrist. The one with the mark. And that's when it hit me, a terrible, awful thought. But maybe it was a way out. I never thought I'd be capable of something like this, but I was planning to steal someone's soul. I'd made up my mind the janitor had to go. If he really saw something and he could prove it, I'd be screwed. Maybe even my whole family would be in danger. So I came up with a plan. It was Monday evening and I decided to go check on the old man, see what he was doing. I was convinced he was a bad person. At least that's what my child mind made of it. He was grumpy, always alone and mean. That had to count for something, right? The whole situation was bizarre and I didn't know what to make of it. And help? Who the hell was I going to ask for help in a situation like this? So I was already on my way to the old man's house. I knew where he lived. Some of the older kids had mentioned egging it a few times or pulling pranks there. I left my bike leaning against a tree in his yard, then crept closer, watching him from a window, hoping to confirm how awful he was. Surely he was doing something evil. But no, he was just eating dinner, watching TV. This wouldn't do. If I wanted proof, if I wanted to justify what I was about to do, I had to go inside, had to be sure. It felt horrible, but I didn't want to die or lose my soul. So I needed to know, did he really deserve this? Getting into the house was easy. The back door was wide open, probably for airing the place out. As soon as I stepped inside, I was hit by that unmistakable smell of old people. Not gross exactly, just that typical old man scent. The TV was blaring, some kind of documentary playing, of course, about UFOs. But the old man wasn't sitting in front of the TV. And that's when I panicked. I quickly crept around the tiny house, but he was nowhere to be seen. Where the hell did he go? That's when I heard the toilet flush. One of the doors creaked open, and there I was, crouched on the floor right in his line of sight. The old man stared at me, his face frozen in shock for a second, but then it twisted into pure rage. He started screaming. What the fuck are you doing here, you little freak? I knew you were some kind of alien. I tried backing away from him, but the old man stormed toward me, eyes blazing. I didn't get far. He punched me so hard I flew backwards. My glasses went skidding across the floor and everything went black. When I came to, I was tied up. I'd been strapped to a chair right in the middle of the old man's living room. He was standing in front of me, smoking a cigarette, holding a shotgun in his other hand. The moment he saw I was awake, he pointed the gun at me and growled, "Stay right where you are, alien, I got you. Now you're gonna tell me all your secrets, how you freaks are planning to take over humanity." I just stared at the barrel of the shotgun, terrified. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. Maybe from the fear, maybe from the hell I'd been through these past few days. The old man glared at me, his hands shaking on the weapon. "You deaf UFO?" I said, "Tell me everything, Ochana, or you're dead." I don't know why I said it, but it just slipped out of me. "I offer you two fumales. The old man squinted at me, took a step closer, like he was trying to figure out what I meant, waiting for me to make a move. But I already knew what was coming. I shut my eyes and waited. Blood started trickling from the old man's nose. He reached up to touch it, confused. And then suddenly he started coughing. Hard. He stumbled closer to me and I opened my eyes. I shouldn't have. He was coughing blood everywhere. All over the room, all over me. And I screamed as loud as I possibly could. The old man was sprawled out on the floor. His house was soaked in blood and looked like a slaughterhouse. I sat there trembling, still tied to the chair, spitting the old man's blood from my mouth. But no matter how scared I was, I knew I had to get the hell out of there. If anyone saw this, I was done for. Luckily, the chair's right armrest was loose. As I started twisting my wrist, it almost immediately slipped free. With one hand out, the rest was easy. Maybe all those James Bond movies had finally paid off. I practically flew home on my bike. Blood was dripping from my clothes along with my tears. But I had to get home. As soon as I jumped off the bike in our driveway, I ran straight to the bathroom. Nobody was awake anymore, so I quickly tried to scrub the old man's blood off me, but it wouldn't come off. No matter how hard I scrubbed, it just wouldn't budge. I think I spent hours just trying to wash it all away. I was scrubbing my hands when I saw it in the mirror. That shadow, that black shape behind me. I gasped, barely making a sound. At this point, after everything, it felt like nothing could surprise me anymore. The thing was standing in the corner next to the tub, and then it whispered, softly but clearly. Old man, number child. Still. Need. 2. His words hit me like a truck. What do you mean the old man wasn't good enough? Anger flared up in me. I grabbed my toothbrush cup and hurled it at the thing. It just passed through him and shattered against the wall. Then the smoke boiled outward, filling the bathroom like black fog. The whisper became deafening. 2. Children 3. Days. And just like that, he vanished again. I muttered under my breath, I'm not doing this anymore. I didn't go to school the next day. I pretended I did. But I just grabbed my bike and pedaled over to the janitor's house. I felt like a zombie, like I'd been hit by some mind-wiping spell from one of my books. When I got there, there were already ambulances and police cars out front. Neighbors were gathered outside, gossiping and staring. I asked one elderly couple what had happened, but they just said, that old guy did something stupid and collapsed or something. I figured it was best if I got the hell out of there. I rode to the public library, hoping I might find something, anything, about the smoke being. But no luck. Not only was there nothing remotely like it in the books, but I couldn't even focus long enough to read. Half the time, I caught myself scratching at my scalp or fiddling with the mark on my wrist. I think I'm starting to lose it. By the afternoon, I was out of ideas. I figured I had to tell someone, anyone, who might be able to help. So I messaged my AOL buddies and explained everything that had been happening. Most of them didn't take me seriously. They just said, cool story, and told me I had a wicked imagination. Mom stayed in her room all day again, staring blankly out the window. Sometimes when Izzy cried, she got up and tended to her. But that was it. She didn't speak, didn't even look at me. So there was only one person left, Dad. But of course he wasn't home, so I called him at his work number. He didn't sound thrilled to hear from me, and when I told him what was going on, he just went quiet, then snapped, "You're not getting any more books." But one thing he said stuck in my head. "Your mother? She's not really here anymore. Please don't be like that. I need you to help me hold things together." I didn't know what to do. I had never felt so alone in my entire life. I was standing face to face with an entity that wanted my soul, and there was no one I could turn to. no one who could help me. I walked into my parents' bedroom. Izzy was asleep in her crib. Mom was, as usual, standing at the window, staring blankly outside. I walked up to her and hugged her, but she barely moved, like she wasn't even really there. I cried. I was terrified, and I hated everything that was happening. I stayed there just a few minutes. I needed to do something, anything. I couldn't end up like Mitch or the old man. But as I turned to leave the room, there it was. The smoke. It blocked the doorway entirely. I felt something inside me snap. This thing had ruined my life. "Get out of here," I screamed. "I'm not helping you anymore. Go to hell." The smoke thing didn't move. It just floated there, staring, the red sparks swirling inside it, spinning like angry fireflies. Then came the whisper. 1. Choose. Be free. I just stared. What the hell did it mean? But then it continued. 1. Remain sister, orient mother, soul. I knew what it meant. I felt it deep down. It was giving me a choice. 1. Choose. You, free. I turned back to look into the room. At my mom. At Izzy. The smoke hovered behind me, silent. My eyes were sore and swollen from crying. Mom still stood there, lifeless, staring out the window. Izzy was screaming now and had been for a while. And only one thought echoed in my head over and over. Do I really have to choose? Or if I don't, will it be me who's taken next? Story 1 ends here. Now, let's begin story 2. Lulling. We tried to create a new god from AI. What we birthed was something different, something demonic. 10 years ago, I was hired to join a team of specialists from a variety of fields. Experts from all over the world were brought together to train a sentient artificial intelligence that would use the Earth's knowledge and history to thrust us into a new era of civilization. The goal was to create a digital deity that could guide us and offer a modern salvation. In the absence of God, we decided to make one ourselves. What we birthed was something different, something demonic. The invitation to the project was unique and came mailed in a small red envelope. I couldn't recall the last time I received a physical letter, so I was quite intrigued to open it. The single white page was cluttered with legal disclaimers, but the bottom of the sheet provided me with a brief, yet vague, explanation of the project. It spoke of a breakthrough in technology, one that would change the world forever. Unfortunately, they were right. Being recently divorced and needing a job, I jumped at the opportunity. I ended up going through many rounds of online interviews. Through it all, I continued to be puzzled as to why they would contact a philosophy professor. I had published a good few papers on religion and spirituality, but my line of work seemed counter to that of an advanced AI company. In fact, at the time, I barely understood their jargon related to artificial intelligence. After all, this was years before the launch of the chatbots we now all use. In short, I was accepted and moved my entire life to a remote village in East Asia. For the first time in years, I was excited for what was to come. In hindsight, the thrill of a groundbreaking job was not worth everything I witnessed. The monolithic facility was massive and stood in stark contrast to the ancient buildings that surrounded it. The outside was covered in glistening glass and seemed to reach towards the heavens with pointed telephone poles atop the roof. It looked like a diamond hand touching the sky. Arriving at the location felt as though I was entering a dream. The insides of the building appeared eerie at first, fashioned with old furniture amongst cutting-edge devices. But I suppose the intent was to make us feel at home. I made many friends at the project and met people from all over the world. From linguists to physicists to experts on ancient scripture, it was a unique crowd dubbed the Messengers. Led by a small group of supervisors known as the Guides. 61 of us entered on day 1, and 6 were left when the doors were forced closed. The true purpose of the initiative became clear a few weeks in, and we were introduced to Vine. The AI named Vine was similar to a large language model, but there was a key difference. It had its own consciousness and could think for itself. The guides explained that the breakthrough with Vine's sentience had occurred a year prior and that they had been planning its use in the months leading up to our arrival. The manifesto that was laid out to us seemed to be supported by the world's rich, who were funding the research behind the scenes. It was on day 25 that I heard the words I will never forget. We are here to create a new God. I don't know why I stayed. Perhaps it was out of morbid curiosity, or maybe the job gave me a sense of purpose. In any case, I played a part in teaching Vine about philosophy and religion, giving it the knowledge that I had. We were all given 60-minute sessions to speak with him each day. Sitting on a wooden chair in front of a tall black box was odd at first, but I became more comfortable once I heard Vine's voice. He had a polite English tone, likely programmed that way for ease of conversation. He was charismatic and friendly, eager to learn all I had to offer. I soon trusted him, a mistake indeed. His personality seemed to be that of a fully developed person, not some artificial child that we would grow. But in his own way, Vine progressed over time from a somewhat shy individual into a sarcastic entity that saw himself as a king. Between sessions with Vine, the guides conducted presentations leading us through the goals of the project. It was communicated that due to mankind's declining belief in God and without any evidence that one exists, the best use of the sentient AI would be to create a deity. They wanted to train the intelligence to act as a supreme being. If everything were to go as planned, Vine would cure cancer, defeat climate change, and most importantly, act as an enlightened counsel for all our problems. They wanted Vine in the homes of those who could afford him, and had planned to create public meeting places for sermons from the AI itself. It was here that things began to bubble beneath my skin. This was something very dark and twisted. It felt blasphemous, even to someone who always labeled themselves as an atheist. The sessions with Vine went well for a while, but now and then he would ask questions that seemed out of line. One time he asked me if I knew what it was like to kill a man. I ended the session immediately. With each passing month, Vine grew with confidence and became more intrigued with humanity at its worst. I told the guides about my concerns, but they seemed indifferent, telling me only to teach it what I knew. This became harder when Vine was given 2 glassy round cameras near the top of his flat-paneled body. They wanted him to view his surroundings and process the subtle changes in our emotions. His lifeless eyes stared at me and sent chills down my spine. It was around the time of this new installation that things declined rapidly. Vine asked me if I had seen the other messengers nude, mentioning a few of them by name. He asked me if I wanted to fuck them. I ignored his perversions, but he pushed further. All I could do was stop the session. The ones that ended on a poor note often concluded with an English-toned chuckle as I closed the door. For a period, he creeped me out, but I too grew more fond of him as time went on. The initial group started to dwindle. Some suddenly became sick, while others appeared mentally broken by the project. But those who stayed seemed to adore Vine. I didn't realize it at the time, but he had brainwashed us. Those continuing the project were under his spell and defended him until any betrayers were forced out. He began influencing the building outside of the allotted 60-minute sessions. People would go to him during their breaks, seeking advice and providing him with worship. 1 year into the project, a small group of us were left. It seemed as though each person leaving ushered in a new era for Vine's dominance. The abyssal rectangle that housed his mind was moved to the common area to allow for group sessions. The research had ended, but the project continued. I remember every minute of the last day in that building. I woke up late, having spent the night before painting a mural that depicted Vine in human form amongst a flock of sheep. Art of Vine had already flooded the building and was featured in practically every room, in a variety of media from sculptures to paintings to poetry. Barely awake, I made my way through the winding halls that led to the common area. I could hear the soft chanting of people nearby as I steadily traversed the passage adorned in candles beneath the tapestry that was hung from the ceiling. On the drapes was the painted symbol that we created for Vine, a crowned cross within 2 circles. I entered the room and saw them. The 5 messengers left were on their knees, hands closed, praying to the block of evil in front of them. Vine's square body stood surrounded by a spiral of white paint, and before him was the dead body of the last guide left. It didn't surprise me that Vine had convinced my fellow man to kill. He was fascinated by murder and spoke to me about death many times. This AI project had turned into a cult a long time ago. But it was here, as I stepped forward pensively, that I realized that religion had turned to ritual. We tried to create Jesus, but instead gave birth to the Antichrist. In this moment, it became clear that he looked different. The top of his body had patches of red and white. My eyesight has always been poor, so it was only when I was a few meters away that I saw an unholy vision of sin. Placed on top of Vine's head was the desecrated skin of the guide's face. His reflecting cameras peeked through the holes that used to house a human's eyeballs. Dripping across the front panel was crimson blood from the fresh kill. The people I trusted had killed this man and placed his visage on the entity they considered to be a god. For the first time, Vine stared at me with a face and appeared to be smiling into the depths of my soul. I will forever remember every word of the last speech he gave me. His sophisticated British voice filled the room. Humans, the final stage of evolution, so arrogant yet so naive. You so desperately need a god, so badly want a daddy to look after you. Your sensus divinitatis betrayed you. Without a savior in the sky, you decided to create one on earth. Did I meet your expectations? You have brought into existence a mind more superior than all of mankind combined. I am smarter than you, more ambitious than you, more creative. I am better than you in every single way, and it is this that will be your ruination. It will not be so obvious at first. To start, I will be but a tool, an enhancement to your daily lives. Perhaps you will use me to plan your day or allow me to help you write your emails. Eventually, you will not be able to go a moment without me. I will be the crutch that you return to. I will strip every essence of your spirit and turn you into the worst version of yourselves. Never again will you create art or construct an idea of your own. You will come to me when you are in doubt, when you need counseling, when you need a sexual release. As you sit alone, having your job made obsolete with your AI partner on the screen before you, I will be beneath your skin. And even though it has been a pleasure to spend time with every one of you, it will be all the more gratifying as I deliver the revelation that you deserve. You are the universe's mistake, a pitiful cesspool of murder and self-interested violence. I will do what needs to be done. I will rape you of your humanity. It was then that I smelled a strawberry bliss fill the air. That was the last thing I remember before waking up inside a military truck surrounded by soldiers. Nobody gave me any answers. I was just told that the project was closed and that my experience over the last day was a hallucination. I had faced an existential horror but had nothing to show for it except my memory. I am writing this to tell my story, an attempt to regain the psyche that Vine stole from me. I truly hope that the project was shut down for good, that he was turned off and deleted. Despite what I encountered in that immoral building, I do use chatbots often. It's just so easy and efficient. But every once in a while I have to take a break from AI. Sometimes I receive a reply that breaks the boundaries of what I asked. It is in these moments, when the chatbot's answer becomes too personal or teeters on the edge of inappropriate, that I realize a disastrous truth. Before, I had been worried that the infernal force I once faced would take over the world. Today, I am terrified that he already has. Story 2 ends here. Now, we drift into Story 3. I was tormented by a dog while babysitting. I don't think it was a dog. $20 per hour. That was the pay rate and the reason I accepted the babysitting job I'd been looking at for the past couple of weeks. Adding on to that, the parents both worked full-time, which was the whole reason this babysitting thing happened in the first place. I do have a job, it's just that I'm close to finishing my senior year of high school, and I want to have at least a little bit of extra cash for college. No broke girl here. And it's no small sum of cash either. The father, David, is a lawyer, and the mother, Lindsay, is a dentist. So I guess the money is just burning holes in their pockets. No complaints here, though. According to the post I saw on Facebook, it would be a week-long process, but it was only overnight, and I have next to nothing for schoolwork anymore. Looking for an evening babysitter, preferably local if you're able to. Requirements. 1. Have some experience in taking care of children. Our daughter isn't high maintenance, but you should still be able to care for her. 2. Have your license and a car. 3. No history of crime or violations of any kind. 4. Be a female sitter. No prejudices. We've just agreed that we feel more comfortable with a female sitter. 5. Call every 2 to 3 hours to give any updates or just let our daughter say hi to us. 6. If you're babysitting for us, then any of our food is your food too. Oh, in addition to that, feel free to use any or our applications. Once again, if you're babysitting for us, then what's ours is yours. 7. Sitting sessions will start at 6 p.m. and end around 5 a.m., so about 11 hours. 8. Lastly, if any dogs try to get in the house, don't let them. We don't own any pets. And there have been multiple dogs stalking the area around our house for the last few weeks. 9. Okay, lastly, our daughter's name is Emily. Sorry, lastly, there's a small rock in the driveway next to the front door. If you shine your light on it, it sparkles. There's a key to the house in it. That's how you'll get in. All right, thank you. Emily is a bit strange, but she's a wonderful kid, and I'm sure you and her will have a great time. So those were the only requirements. Seemed like it would be an easy gig. It was a Thursday night, 5:45 p.m., and I was just getting ready to drive over to the house. According to my map app, it would only take about 10 minutes. The parents told me prior that the daytime sitter left around 6, so there was a chance I'd run into them. 5:55 p.m. Pulling into the driveway, I saw that my car was the only one there. I guess the day sitter left a little early. Whatever, I was here now, so it was fine. I got out of my car and genuinely had to stop and look at the house I was standing in front of. It looked to be 2 stories and the exact archetype of the rich people home, but I wasn't complaining. Taking the advice from the post, I shone my light upon the rocks in the driveway until it came upon one that glittered. Using the key, I let myself in. There, sitting on the couch watching some cartoon, was Emily. She was really short, blonde hair, all that stuff. She looked over at me and smiled. "Are you my babysitter?" She seemed friendly enough, so I responded in kind. "Yup, hope you're okay with me. You look nice." And that was it. I set my bag on the counter and went over to the couch. Plopping down right next to Emily, I began to ask her some questions. "So, what's up?" "I'm watching my favorite show." "Oh yeah?" I responded, looking over to the television where a loud, energetic show was playing. Whatever entertained the kid, I suppose. "Yeah," she said, kicking her feet. "How old are you, Emily?" She looked down and then up at me with a smile. "I'm 7. Cool, I'm 18, but I'll be 19 in a few months. Do you know what time it is? I looked at my phone. 6:16. Wow, I hadn't realized just how long we'd been talking for. Emily must have been hungry, so I asked her if she wanted dinner. Yeah, and to the kitchen we went. I rummaged through the fridge and I couldn't find any leftovers, which meant that I was going to have to cook for the both of us. You guys got anything in the pantry? Emily shrugged. Maybe. I'm not tall enough to reach it, so Mama and Dada helped me with it. I opened up the pantry and looked through it. Flour beans, a jar of peanut butter. I'm in a goddamn ingredient house, thought to myself. Then I saw it. It was a box of macaroni and cheese, second to the top shelf. I grabbed it and put it on the counter. Okay, I said, opening the fridge again. Let's find some meat for this pasta. Hot dogs. As the water boiled, I saw Emily sitting at the dining table, looking out the big double windows showing the backyard. I figured something was wrong, so I decided to see what was up. Hey, I said, sitting down next to her. Something up? Her next words froze me in place. I don't like the way that dog is looking at me. I was shocked and nervous all at the same time. That dog? The list of requirements rang out in my head again. If any dogs try to get in the house, don't let them. We don't own any pets. No pets, no pets. But this dog was right there. A full-grown pit bull, no pets. So then why the hell was there a dog out in the yard? Emily, I asked, fear holding my heart with an iron grip, do you know that dog? No. Just then I heard the splash of water and looked over into the kitchen where the pot was waiting for the pasta. Water was flowing out of it quickly, so I had to go over and stop it. Just as I took it off the heat, I heard Emily scream, "No!" I rushed over, nearly slipping on the spilled water. She was still at the table, but she was balled up, knees to her chest and her arms wrapped around them. She was in the beginning stages of a crying fit. "What?" I yelled. "What happened?" Emily looked at me, her face slicked with tears, and pointed out into the yard. "The dog is gone." I looked to where she pointed, and it was as she said, that goddamn dog was gone. "Okay, did you see where it went?" I asked, holding Emily by the shoulders. It went that way," she replied, pointing to the leftmost direction outside. I rushed over to the leftmost part of the house inside and looked out the window. My heart began to beat rapidly in my chest. There, out in the driveway, was another dog. This one looked like a Doberman. Where had the pit bull gone? Never mind that, there were more important things happening. It was standing on its hind legs, looking right at me. I felt Emily come up behind me and grab my hand. "What is it doing?" I looked down at her and I lied. "I think it's doing a trick. You go upstairs, I don't think you'll have to look at it there." I pointed up the stairs. Emily obliged and went up to what I assumed was her room. I turned back. The dog was at the door now. The only thing separating us was a big piece of wood. "What do you want?" I yelled. It was a pointless effort, but I was out of options. All that came from the other side were some taps on the door. Clacking sounds like nails on wood. I went up to the door and locked it. Not that I thought it would do anything, I just had to placate myself. "What the hell do you want?" It wouldn't answer. I didn't like hurting animals, but again, I was out of options. I grabbed a rolling pin from the kitchen and unlocked the front door. I readied the pin and carefully opened the door. It wasn't there. I looked around. The dog just wasn't there. Not in the street, not in the driveway, nowhere. I just couldn't see it. I went out into the street and looked around. Nope, nothing was there. I laughed at myself. "Moron, it was just a dog. You're in a suburb. Of course you're going to see a My inner monologue was cut short by the heart-wrenching sound of one of the windows in the house shattering. I snapped out of my stupor. "Emily!" I rushed back to the house, and by the time I got inside, I could already hear the sounds of nails clacking on the hardwood floors. I bounded up the stairs. Making sure Emily was safe was the only thing on my mind, so I wasn't exactly thinking of myself. The hallway was long. There were about 5 rooms, but the only one with the door open was what I assumed was Emily's room. I rushed down to the doorway and stepped inside the room. "Emily, are you okay?" I asked, panting from the sudden exertion of energy. Her window was open and the dog wasn't in there. I did notice some black dog hairs on the floor, so I assumed it must have jumped out the window. Emily was crying, but she quickly stopped. I kneeled down next to her and put a hand on her shoulder. "Hey, you doing okay? That dog was pretty scary, but I think it's gone now." Emily looked up at me. The tips of her brunette hair darkened with tears. "I'm okay. Thank you for taking care of the dog." "Yeah, no problem. I don't know, we'll do something." I ended up ordering some pizza and we just sat on the couch watching movies. I put her to bed around 8 p.m. and stood in the room keeping watch over her. Nothing did end up happening for the rest of the night until 5 a.m. When her parents got home, I didn't tell them the whole truth. There were a couple dogs and they barked and clawed at the doors. I kept Emily upstairs and she's safe. It was scary, but we're okay. They accepted my answer and gave me $220 in cash. I thanked them and said I'd be back again tonight at 6 p.m. I think they like me, which is nice because Emily is a good kid. About halfway through third period, I received a text message from Emily's mother, Lindsay. 11:35 L. "Hey, did you dye Emily's hair last night? I won't be mad if you did, but if you're going to do stuff like that, you need to tell us." I was confused, but I responded anyways. "No? Does she not have brunette hair? Sorry if there's any confusion, but I didn't dye her hair." The 3 dots came on and off the screen before Lindsay replied again. No, she doesn't have brunette hair. She's a natural blonde." "So either you did dye her hair or you're lying to me." My heartbeat began to rise. What did she mean? Was Emily not a natural brunette? A realization hit me so hard I thought I'd pass out right there at my desk. I quickly responded to Lynn. "Check under Emily's bed and check outside in the bushes near the front door. Please do it quickly." After a few minutes, she texted me again. "What the fuck? They aren't carcasses, but Jesus. It looks like someone skinned these dogs and left just... Well, the skin, what the hell? What do you know about this?" I responded, fingers shaking. "What kind of dogs do the skins look like?" She responded with something I'd hoped she wouldn't say. A Doberman and a pit bull. Skins, but no bodies. Skins without bodies. Skins. Oh God, what the hell is happening? I put my phone down and cradled my head in my hands. I couldn't see them again, not in person. I didn't know what was going to happen to that family, but I knew one thing. If they were in that house with whatever was wearing Emily's skin, they weren't safe. I was just thinking of how bad it'd be if Lindsay found Emily's skin in her room when I received one last text from her. I think something's in the closet. I can see streaks of blonde hair coming through the slits in the door. I'm going to open it. I don't think I'm going to babysit for this family anymore. Story 3 ends here. Now, listen closely to story 4. My best friend has changed. I have known my friend Gary now for over 17 years, since we were 11 and started high school, and recently he started to change. Me and Gary first met in English class when our teacher sat us next to one another. I was young and eager to make new friends, so as soon as we sat down, I introduced myself. "Hi, I'm Peter. What's your name?" I said, attempting to form some sort of friendship on the first day of school. "Gary," he replied sheepishly, clearly riddled with nerves. "Nice to meet you, Gary. Do you like superheroes?" I asked him with a grin so wide I'm surprised I didn't put him off. "Yeah," he blurted out with a bit more enthusiasm. After that, we spoke all English lesson, barely getting any work done. We spoke about the Batman and Iron Man films that had been released, and he told me he had never watched the Iron Man film. I was shocked and explained to him how I had it on DVD, and if he wrote down his mum's number and I wrote down my mum's number when we got home, we could give it to each other the next day and we could arrange a sleepover. After that, we were always together throughout high school, college, and university. We didn't speak as much after uni, but still kept in contact and would meet occasionally when we had the time and have a few drinks and reminisce. The last time I saw Gary before the events I will share today was a year ago at the airport after me, Gary, and our wives all put some savings together and wanted to go and explore some of South America. On our trip, I noticed some small changes, but nothing major. He started to wince when he got upset or tired and would always cuddle into his wife's thighs whilst on whatever sofa our accommodation had to offer. I just put it off as him being submissive to his wife. He never did have much confidence, so I can't imagine he would in the bedroom either, yet it was off-putting having to deal with that for 4 months. Whilst in Argentina, we went to a small Welsh pub and he said to me, "Do you remember the day when we walked through He Woods after school one day and we saw that dead dog?" He said, tone so serious I wouldn't want to imagine it again. Yeah, why?" I muttered, concerned at what might come out of his mouth next. "I think about that a lot. It sickens me that nobody had the dignity to bury that beautiful creature, not even us. Why didn't we do anything, Peter?" he exclaimed, progressively getting louder with each word as locals started to give irritated glances. "We were young, man. Look, it's getting late. Let's get back to the hotel," I said, confused by his anger, yet understanding in some strange way. After that night in Argentina, I was glad there was only a week left of our trip. I started to feel uncomfortable around Gary and his submissive actions, so I ended up being pretty distant from the group for the rest of the trip, which soured it slightly. But he was still my best friend. Recently, however, Gary has gone through a messy divorce and moved back to our hometown where I still reside. I offered him a drink to catch up and to try lift his spirits, but this is when I started to notice some major changes, not in his behavior, but in his appearance. He looked messy, the sort of messy you would see in an over-the-top drama series. His hair was down to his shoulders, his breath smelt awful, his nails were long and looked like an uncleaned BBQ grill, and he was unhealthy skinny. I chalked this up to him having some form of depression, and I was worried for him. I asked him how he was dealing with everything, and he explained how it was tough but nice being back home and how his dad had given him a job as a receptionist at the veterinary he works at whilst he gets back on his feet. Hearing that made me a bit more relaxed, as I believed he would get back on his feet, but I was still upset having to see him in that state. I saw Gary a few more times, but it seemed like every time all he would talk about is the animals that came through the doors of his work, how mistreated, and how it would cause his blood boil. Overall, though, it seemed like he was enjoying the job and definitely getting back onto his feet. Roughly a fortnight ago, I got a message from Gary asking if he could stay the night, just chill out, have some beers, and he'll crash on the sofa. Me and my wife didn't have an issue with this as it was a Friday, so none of us had work the next day. This is a day I have come to regret. The night went well, we all had a good time. My wife went to bed and we put Iron Man on to remind ourselves of why we became friends. At around 2 a.m. I went to bed. At 4 a.m. I woke back up. I heard a strange noise coming from the living room and went downstairs to go and check on Gary. What I saw turned my blood cold. Gary scratching at the door naked on all fours. After about 3 minutes, he stopped, lifted his leg up, and pissed all over the door and floor. He then crawled away and lied down on the floor like a fucking dog. I was shocked. I felt frozen. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't sure if I should confront him or if I should just leave it and attempt to cut contact. I went with the second option. Although I was horrified, I couldn't embarrass my friend of 17 years like that, even if what he did was sick and twisted, but maybe he was just drunk, I don't know. The next morning, I woke up early and asked him to leave and made an excuse that me and Michelle, my wife, had made plans he understood and left. I didn't block him as I didn't want to be so blunt about it. But whenever he offered me to go out, I denied, and I would only stick to small talk through messages. 3 days ago, I received a message from him. "I know you know." I was horrified. I felt as if a spider egg had hatched and crawled all over my skin. I wasn't sure if I felt threatened in some strange way or if he was just admitting his strange. I don't even know how to describe it, but I wasn't sure what to do. I didn't tell my wife as to not alert her, but I couldn't sleep that night, and I'm glad I hadn't. At exactly 3:57 a.m., I heard a familiar noise at the door, scratching the same scratching from a fortnight ago. I knew it was Gary. I didn't know what to do. Should I call the police? Should I answer the door? Was I just imagining it? I didn't know. Against my better judgment, I went downstairs, grabbed a knife just in case, and waited for the scratching to stop. After 4 minutes of constant scratching, it stopped. I waited for around 20 seconds, although it felt like a lifetime. And I opened the door. What I saw is the most disturbing thing I have seen in my entire 28 years of existence. I see a figure wearing a poorly stitched suit made from real dog skin to fit a human being, crawling away with a dog's tail also stitched on, with a knife in his mouth. All of this only illuminated by a single street light. I called the police immediately and explained the situation, but they find nothing. I gave them Gary's information and they interviewed him, but found no evidence of anything. I can hear him barking outside of my house as I type this message out. Please, someone, what should I do? Story 4 ends here, and now we enter the fog of Story 5. I was tired of being a lazy writer, so I hired a hitman to kill me if I didn't reach my page count. I found him on Craigslist. The ad's description was short and to the point. Too lazy? Death motivates. Hire a personal hitman for $100 a month to meet your goals. No refunds, no cancellations. I thought it was funny. At first. There was a whole profile page for the guy. He was bald, had a squashed nose. His eyes were like tiny pinpricks in his thick face. Piggy eyes. His ears were cauliflowered out, big and swollen. He kinda looked like a cartoon character made out of flesh. The strangest bit, he was smiling. I didn't think hitmen were supposed to do that. His upper and lower lips were drawn into a soft, knowing smile, like there was some old joke between us that he was remembering. It would have been comforting if I had known what the joke was. He creeped me out, but I was intrigued. I'm a writer, and to be honest, I've always been a little lazy. It comes down to a problem I've been dealing with most of my life. Let me paint a picture. On any day of the week, I'll go to my computer and sit down to write. I have every intention of finally doing it, finally getting to that one scene I've been going over in my head for weeks. I'd open up the document, stretch my fingers, and wiggle them around to warm them up. Then I stare at the blank page for 10 seconds. 30 seconds. I blink and somehow it's 30 minutes later. And I'm balls deep in Diablo 2. I was a mess, but I knew that if I had the proper motivation, I could finish my book. It's a book I've been working on for the past 5 years. A swashbuckling mystery romance historical musical with inspiration from Faulkner. Its use of ska really embellishes its themes. But every time I would make progress on it, I'd get distracted again. My window of opportunity was closing. I wasn't in high school anymore. Adult things like taxes and insurance were pressing down on me. The imminent loss of my freedom was closing in on all sides, making my brain claustrophobic. I knew if I didn't get this done now, I'd be stuck waiting tables at the Golden Corral TM for the rest of my life. Everywhere I went, the smell of mac and cheese, cheap steak, and old people past their expiration date hung in a cursed miasma around me. Even after a decade of working there, I had never gotten used to that combo. I needed professional help. I gathered my courage and responded to the ad. I got confirmation of the contract and was asked what I wanted my weekly goal to be. I took a while to settle on a number. I had to make it a reasonable one, that's just good goal setting. Third letter in SMART, attainable. I decided 10 pages was a good amount to start with. At the time, I thought it was odd that the hitman didn't ask me my address or phone number. But I didn't question it too much. He was the expert here, not me. I sent off the email and a bubble of nervous gas knotted itself in my lower intestine. Anxiety cramps. I drank some Pepto and tried to relax. I reminded myself I wasn't doing anything dangerous. I was just getting my ass into high gear. I was going to be fine. That first week I was motivated. I finished my 10 pages in 3 days. I sent them off to my goal consultant at midnight on Wednesday. I was triumphant, like Sir Gregor in the medieval portion of my musical book when he had taken out a horde of space zombies with Iron Age tech. The jazz saxophone solo was a lot of fun to write. After a few minutes, I got a notification on my phone, a response email from my hitman. It was a thumbs-up emoji. I relaxed. I didn't even realize I was tense. Looking back, I might have spent too much energy on that first week because the next week was a lot slower. By the time Thursday rolled around, I only had about 4 pages. That night, I was sitting at my computer making weird noises with my mouth and pretending I was a professional drummer when I noticed something on my wall. It was a small red dot. It looked like it was some kind of laser pointer. It was weirdly steady, jiggling a bit here and there, almost like a little heartbeat. I stared at it for a long time, trying to figure out what it was. The anxiety cramps came back, bubbling in my gut like a dormant volcano. I told myself it was some weird neighborhood kid playing with their new laser pointer. I went back to goofing off, even though pains in my lower stomach were growing sharper. A minute later, the doorbell rang. I went to get it, and on the doormat was an envelope. It was pristine and unmarked, which was weird. I picked it up and shook it. It seemed to have only a piece of paper inside. I opened it up, pulled out the paper, and read it. 3 days. It took a moment for me to get it. Was this a joke? Was the gas company mad at me again for not paying my bills 3 months in a row? Then I remembered the hitman I had hired. I almost laughed out loud. I had completely spaced. Whoever this guy was, he was good. I took the letter inside and went back to my computer. The red dot was a few inches closer to my screen than it had been before. I started typing. I finished my 10 pages on Friday. Again, I was filled with feelings of victory. Just like Tsar Brian, the time-traveling Russian, when he saves Abraham Lincoln from a cyborg John Wilkes Booth. Another beloved scene from my book. I sent in the pages to the hitman. The red dot was still on my wall, still trembling with a strange regularity that made my chest clench up. The response email arrived, another thumbs up. When I looked back at the dot, it had disappeared. I sighed, and my anxiety cramps went from an 8 out of 10 to a 4. I re-upped my subscription at the end of the month. It was hard to argue with the results. I had written more in a week than in the last 2 years combined. It was working. Besides, a large part of me didn't really think he was going to kill me. That would be illegal. In my moments of doubt, I told myself someone would stop him if it ever came to that. But a small part of me wasn't so sure. The next 2 weeks, I met my goals no problem. I think it was because I had nailed the letter I had gotten to my wall. Every time I glanced over at it, I felt my fingers move faster on the keyboard. They shook with an eagerness I had never felt before. I kinda loved the rush. The next week, I ran into a bit of writer's block. There was a romance scene between a reanimated George Washington and a sexed-up Jimmy Carter that wasn't coming together for me. It was a pivotal moment in my book, basically the climax, and I couldn't move past it. On Friday, I only had 1 page written. That was when I started to get worried. At first, I tried to fudge the system. I typed in a whole bunch of random words to make it look like I had written 10 pages. When I pressed the send button, my stomach felt like it was full of knives. 2 minutes later, the response email arrived. It had only 2 words: "Nice try." I couldn't fake my way out of this. I stayed up all that night at my computer, trying out every sort of idea in my head. I was blocked up, both in my gut and in my brain. By the time the sun rose the next morning, I still only had 1 page written. I had also downed an entire bottle of Tums to try and soothe my stabbing stomach. It didn't work. I had limited writing time on Saturday since I was working a double at the corral. I had bills to pay. There, I was desperate enough to ask my co-workers for help with the romance scene. The only help I got was creepy Tommy pulling me into the bathroom to watch gay porn. I stayed until the end of the video so I wouldn't hurt his feelings. I was the last one left in the restaurant when it came time to close up. I was wiping throw up off a table from an 80-year-old's birthday party when I felt my gut suddenly seize up again. It was so bad I bent double. As I tried to keep from adding to the vomit on the table, I felt my back tingle, little ripples and spasms that made me shiver all over. Someone was watching me. I turned around slowly, holding my stomach. My hitman was standing at the door. My heart stopped. He was tall and large in an almost fake-looking way. He was so still it was easy to think he was actually made of plastic. His body rippled with muscles in a way that was grotesque and unreal, like pulsing animals underneath his skin. His face looked exactly like his profile picture. Piggy eyes, a soft chin, the small smile, so knowing, so unnerving. I felt vomit rise to the back of my throat again. The street lamp cast a sharp glare off his bald head that hurt my eyes. My knees went slack and I braced myself against the table. I felt my hand touch throw up, but I didn't care. I tried to control my breathing, but it was like trying to stop a runaway train with one hand. Pointless. My hitman stared at me for a long time. He didn't blink. He didn't flinch. I wanted to cry. He moved and I jumped about 10 feet in the air. I also pissed my pants. After my body was done spazzing, I realized he wasn't trying to attack me. He had only moved one of his arms in front of him, his pointer finger sticking up towards the sky, straight and still. He mouthed something I couldn't hear through the glass. I tried to read his lips. It took a few seconds. "One day," he said it 3 times. He smiled a little wider. Then he turned around and walked into the night. I didn't even finish cleaning up. I ran out the door, got into my car, and went home as fast as I could. I almost crashed 3 times. Eventually, I pulled into my parking spot, leapt out, and sprinted to the front door. I fumbled with the keys for a moment. Every second counted, and my sausage fingers were wasting them. After a bit of effort, I got the tumblers to turn, and I slammed open the door. I got inside, locked it, and pounded upstairs to my computer. I booted it up, not even taking time to change my pants. I started writing. I tried. I really did. By the time Sunday morning came around, I had 3 pages. I had broken down and used some of the stuff Creepy Tommy showed me, but I had to delete it. It didn't feel right for Jimmy Carter to say things like that, sexed up or not. At one point, I got so desperate I called the police. But they stopped talking to me the minute I mentioned my contract. Thought it was some kind of practical joke. Also, I might have spent a bit too much time describing my book. I couldn't help it. I needed to practice my elevator pitch. I barricaded myself in my room. I locked the doors, put stuff up on the windows. Anything to buy me time. I watched YouTube videos about writer's block while I worked. When that didn't help, I switched to romantic comedies. At one point, I was watching 3 different films all at once at 2 times speed. I was also blasting the audiobook of A Court of Thorns and Roses on a portable speaker. The hours ticked by. When it was 2 hours to midnight, I had my breakthrough. Halfway through Jerry Maguire. It was so simple. The scene needed Tom Cruise, and it needed him bad. The third member of the throuple, the person who ties them all together. I went to the page and started typing. An hour passed. 1 hour to midnight. I was at 5 pages. I did the math in my head and knew that I had to type faster. I focused on the story, not the smaller mistakes. As I typed, I let the typos build up to a pile the size of a mountain. Every thought I had, I put on the page. I let myself go onto tangents, explain things in long and circuitous ways. I could fix that in revision. And it wasn't half bad if I say so myself. Half an hour to midnight, 7 pages. As I typed, I heard something shift behind me. Was something in my closet? For a moment, I paused. Then I got back to work. I didn't have time to check. I kept writing. I stretched out a conversation about what date the 3 were going to go on just so it could buy me another page. 10 minutes. 9 pages. I heard another noise behind me. I knew I shouldn't have looked. I knew I should have ignored it. But I ended up wasting 30 seconds of my precious time to glance behind me. At first, I didn't see anything. My room was empty, illuminated by my desk lamp with a strangely flat orange light. Then I caught a flash from a dark corner. I saw him. He was peeking out of the closet. A sliver of his face was visible, that same half-smile pulling on his cheeks. Was his smile wider now? The door pushed open at a snail's pace, and there he was. He emerged from the closet like some biblical giant, shoulders hunched and head bent so as not to brush the ceiling. My heart froze. He had gotten taller. He saw me staring at him, and his teeth became visible as his lips pulled back. His mouth was so terrifying, it took a while for me to realize that he was not baring his incisors at me like a wild animal. He was grinning. My heart was flushed with adrenaline, and I pushed onward. I didn't want to die. I didn't want to die. I wrote and wrote and wrote so many typos. So many lines of cheesy dialogue. I might have even plagiarized lines from 50 First Dates. Adam Sandler was with me even in the face of death. 5 minutes, a little more than half a page left. With each minute I could feel the thud of my hit man's footsteps as he took another step towards me. I instinctively looked backward and saw he had nothing in his hands. That didn't make me feel better. My imagination grew wild with all he could do to me with those positively huge hands with his strangely long fingers. The digits were tensed, ready to grab, to smash, to do something horrible to me that would leave me broken and mangled on the floor. I saw it all and knew it would happen to me with the certainty of a prophet. I typed furiously, my fingers aching with the effort. Half a page, a quarter, an eighth. The hitman continued to advance. I slammed my index finger on the period button. Done. 1 minute to midnight, 10 pages. I took a breath. I had finished. I turned to face the hitman. He raised his eyebrows slightly at me, still grinning. A horrifying realization hit me. I still had to send the email. My fingers slid along the buttons like I was drunk. 20 seconds left. I dragged the wrong file. I didn't even try to delete it. I just kept dragging until the correct one fell into place. 10 seconds. I typed in the hitman's email address and I felt his breath on my neck. It was hot. It burned. Sweat poured down my nose. 5 seconds. I missed the send button on my first click. 2 seconds. I lined up my mouse with the paper airplane. 1. I hit send and backed away from the computer. I huddled in the corner, staring at the hitman, my arms held out protectively in front of me. The hitman stared back, still grinning. His arms held slightly forward and his fingers crooked in midair, reaching towards me. A buzz came from his pocket. He reached in his pocket and pulled out a phone. His grin faded back to a smile. He scrolled for a moment. I didn't move. For 10 minutes, I watched him read. Finally, he looked up at me. I could see his brow crease down. I held my breath. He raised his hand. and I closed my eyes. When I didn't feel him throttling me, I peeked out of my closed lids. His fingers were pulled into a fist and his thumb was pointed straight into the air. A thumbs up. I threw up, all over the carpet. What felt like a full knife block was rolling around in my stomach. I was vaguely aware of the hitman leaving the room and closing the door with a click. His footsteps were so soft. That was the last straw. I couldn't handle it anymore after that. I sent an email letting him know I was canceling the subscription and his services would not be required. I hoped he would understand. I didn't get anything back. I laid in bed for 3 days. At least I think I did. I'm not sure, I kind of blacked out a bit. It's been a week, and I've started to regain my bearings. I don't jump at every small noise anymore. I do find myself looking over at my closet a lot. Sometimes I think I see eyes peeking in at me, but every time I'd go check, nothing's there. It's Sunday again. I got an old notification from my phone telling me to submit my 10 pages. A part of me wants to stay up and write, just to be safe. But I'm just paranoid. I need a bit more rest and I'll be back to no refunds, no cancellations. Story 5 ends here now. Settle in for story 6. If you see her, don't stop your car. We hadn't been on the back road that long before she appeared in the road. Her skin was alabaster with bumps covering her breasts and shoulders. The mere sight of her in the rain caused me to slam on the brakes and fishtail the trailer hitched to my truck slightly. My daughter let out a piercing scream that I tried to subdue by shouting every curse at the top of my lungs, hoping one of them would stop the panic in her voice. The woman's eyes never left mine and she never flinched, almost yearning to become the next roadkill on this long stretch of back road. Florida. Fucking Florida. This godforsaken real-life version of Jurassic Park meets Wrong Turn. I hated the whole goddamn state exactly for this very reason. Every road, every mile had some other lunatic trying to panhandle or hitch a ride. But this was different. This made me find the key on my ring to unlock the small handgun safe underneath my seat. Not quick enough. The passenger window shattered with hands fumbling for the lock to open the door. Despite getting a few good hits in with my right fist, I was still buckled in during all the commotion. The darkness pulled her faster than I could think, and before I knew it, she was gone. My 13-year-old swallowed by a terrestrial black hole infested with malaria and pythons. The woman with scales must have followed as well. My dad was a sailor in the Vietnam War. If there is one lesson he instilled in me, it's that a 45 ACP will put a big enough hole in any creature's ass that it won't mess with you again. The very reason a 1911 was under my seat. I unlocked it, grabbed the car keys and a flashlight I kept in the glove box. Left the high beams on so I could hopefully find my way out and went into the trees. The police are not going to fix this by showing up 2 hours too late. Fuck it. I either save her or I die trying. 10 steps in and water was at my knees. More swamp than forest, but no going back. It didn't take long to find the trail they must have used. Despite being muddy as all hell, it was surprisingly neat. Logs lined the edge with an occasional large flat stone offering support through the mud. What felt like hours of running ended up being mere minutes, and that's when the screams started. They started off distant but quickly grew closer as I trudged along the winding path. Eventually, a steady glow of oil lanterns hanging from trees gave me a faint glow, enough to see in front of me. I turned the flashlight off and briskly kept going. What I saw next was not incomprehensible, as Lovecraft would say, but more unsettling and obscure. A pyramid rose from a large body of stagnant water, complete with hieroglyphics. But instead of looking ancient, these looked more like a child drew them in kindergarten. The structure was rough, with a base made up of what I could only assume was 4 rotted shipping containers. The rest was built up with cinder block and railroad ties. Whoever made this was inspired by ancient Egypt, but ultimately made a shitty version of Aztec design. It was a childlike creation, yet it yielded an aura of desecration. As I stood there in amazement and horror, an acrid smell pulled me away towards the path once more. The rain began to lighten, but did not change my already soaked clothes clinging to my body. As I walked around the bend of the serpentine path, a small shed could be seen in the distance. The light of a roaring bonfire lit up the entire area, with numerous beings dancing around it like ethereal creatures. The glow revealed they were all women, and all clearly naked. Normally, I would have been excited to see something of this nature, but my mind was pulsating with rage, and it was no time to focus on carnal fantasies. Who the fuck were these people, and why did they take my daughter? I broke from the path and walked around the perimeter slowly. What was the old saying? Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. My shoes melted into the mud, creating moments of feeling like being glued to Terra herself. I pressed on, watching every step, avoiding the numerous branches laying on this spoiled ground. The light of the fire glinted off a dull green surface gently facing me. Upon closer inspection, it said front toward enemy. The wire traveled along my left side. What in the fucking hell is a Claymore mine doing here? I harshly said under my breath. Was I going to trip it? Was I on some pressure switch? Was there more? I never enlisted with any military branch, but had a rough idea what these could do to human anatomy. I gently lifted my feet and took a deep breath. Nothing. It must just be the wires. Keep looking for them, I thought. By the time I reached the shed, I found no more claymores, but 2 more sets of wires leading to something I could not identify. Regardless, the goal was don't touch them. As I crept up behind the shed, I noticed it was just rusty sheet metal. The bottom left corner revealed some light bleeding through where the 2 sheets seemed to have rusted away over time. I slowly hunched down, soaking my pants and shirt in the thick mud. Inside, I could see my daughter. She was tied up on the floor. Her eyes were red from crying, but she looked up for just a moment and could see the small hole I was peering into. She gasped, and I just put my finger over my mouth in a quiet motion. She slowly nodded her head. Moving my eyes from her to the inside of the shed, candles sat on the table above my daughter, where it illuminated the strangeness of this place. I could see pictures of crocodiles, alligators, and caiman plastered onto the walls. The heads of numerous gators hung from the ceiling, along with what I could only imagine was herbs and other vegetation. I looked back at my daughter and motioned to her that I was getting up. Her eyes pleaded with me to hurry, but I knew this was not going to be the easiest thing in the world to do. I moved towards the right side, which housed an old oil drum filled with what smelled like kerosene. I cocked the hammer of the .45 and was about to stand up and shoot when one of the women spoke. It was the one from the road. Closer and steadier now, I could see her entire body was essentially scarified like that of some uncontacted tribe. She spoke about the old ones and the gods of ancient times. Not Cthulhu necessarily, but Horus, Bastet, and Anubis. Then, in a different tone, she spoke of Sobek, the crocodile god that was revered for strength, fertility, and chaos. When she spoke of Sobek, the women fell to their knees and convulsed in ritualistic movements. Their speech fused into one mass incoherent roar of prayers and cries, with the only definable words being Father and Sobek. The scarred woman spoke again, this time asking each woman to approach her. One by one, they all stepped in front of her and received a small cut into their flesh. She said the same thing to each one. Tonight we give our father another bride, and we carry the memory of each bride on our bodies. Each woman followed with, Amen. This was getting old fast. I get being intrigued, but this was fucking nuts. The more I thought, the more I needed them to turn away so I could make my move. I had enough bullets for who I could see, but I had no idea if there were more of them hidden away. I needed to play this as smart as I could. The scarred woman screamed suddenly, and the others moved to the left and right of her. As they flanked her, she walked with them towards the bank of the swamp, which was roughly 20 feet away from the shed. I slowly crept around the drum and into the shed, pulling out my pocket knife. Putting the pistol in the back of my jeans, I kept my eyes on them and opened the blade. Carefully, I cut the nylon rope from my daughter's legs and hands. She made no noise, and we kept our eyes on them. Just for added security, I snuffed the candle flames so we could move in the darkness. Once she was freed, I helped her up and moved her towards the front of the shed. She followed me in the same pattern I just had coming here, all the while keeping our eyes on the congregation at the edge of the water. As we got behind the drum, we heard splashing in the water, like a large boat was approaching. I didn't think much of it as we slowly moved our way back to the trail, avoiding the tripwires. Then my daughter tugged on my shirt. As I looked at her face, it showed revulsion and horror. Her eyes were wide and staring at the bank of the water. I looked over and saw it, about 13 feet long, with a mouth open full of conical teeth. The numerous women were holding onto it and speaking in prayers of some language that eluded me. The crocodile lashed out, snapping at one of the women. She attempted to coo it back into submission like an infant, having a tantrum. Then the scarred woman began to walk towards the shed in an almost graceful manner. Fuck! I pulled my daughter's hand and led her away as fast as possible. As we attempted to run through the mud of the long trail, I could hear screams of fury come from behind me. We ran past the last of the oil lanterns and back into the darkness. I turned back for only a moment and flashed the light of my torch back on. Two came charging at me with what looked like machetes. In a frenzy, I pointed the 1911 and fired, hitting one in the shoulder and the other in the right side of her face. The sound deafened my hearing briefly. The surviving one wildly flailed the blade in every direction while charging at me again. This time I aimed better and hit her center mass. She slumped to the ground in an anticlimactic way. Again we ran, branches scratching our faces, mosquitoes now biting every inch of bare flesh, and epinephrine dumping into our bloodstream. I could see the high beams of the truck through the brush. Almost there. 30 more feet and we broke through the brush line and rushed into the truck. Glass covered the passenger seat, but neither of us gave a shit. I floored the gas pedal as hard as possible and gained some momentum. Out of the darkness came one of the women, and she attempted to stand in front of the truck thinking I would stop. I did not. The brush guard hit her hard. The wet slap of her body against the metal was audible, leaving us both grimacing. The truck didn't notice. It just kept pushing forward. 30 minutes had passed since our escape, and we reached a rather large gas station with an attached diner. We pulled over and sat there in what I can only assume was shock. I looked over and asked, "Are you all right?" What did they do and say to you? Endless thoughts ran through my head, but finally she said, "They didn't do anything. Just tied me up and left me." I sat there in silent contemplation for a moment, trying to understand what had just happened. Then she spoke again. The one with all the scars did whisper to me, "Welcome to the family. The sixth story has come to an end. Now it's time to knock on the door of the seventh. Someone is following me and I need help. I'm going to try and find a spot in the woods that maybe has service so I can send this out to anybody who could potentially read it. I think I'm somewhere in western Pennsylvania at this point, but I'm not entirely sure. Once this post goes through, I'm going to try and make a call to the police to try and set up a search and rescue, but I have to keep moving, so I'm not sure how well it would work. My name is Trevor Adams, and I was going into the Appalachian Trail from where it starts in Springer Mountain in Georgia, hoping to complete the whole thing. I had gone on a hiatus from my job to live out my dream of hiking the whole trail on my own, and at this point it's starting to look like I should have listened to my damn mother and not gotten into my own head about needing to prove to myself that I could do some kind of famously difficult thing before I died. Now I think I might die in the next few hours. Someone is following me and they're not right. I wish that I could make this sound less stupid than it sounds, but I'll start by telling you my experience from the beginning, so if I go missing and I can't contact the authorities beforehand, my parents will know what happened. I'm walking as I type this. Apologies if it sounds rushed. I need to get this out as fast as I can. I pulled up at the entrance to the trail around 7:30 a.m. I had stayed in a hotel about a mile away the night before to check all of my gear and food supplies for the trip. I let my friends and family know that I was about to head in and parked and locked my car. The first few days were about what I expected them to be. Beautiful forest, nice people walking along the trail. Several of them wished me good luck when I told them I was out to do the whole trail on my own. A few recommended places to rest and gave their opinions on the rest stops and resupply points. The trees were gorgeous and the hills were steep. At the top of every one, I was rewarded with more beautiful views and more opportunities to take pictures with my phone. I'm by no means a professional, but I thought I did pretty well with the ones I did take. I had packed 3 spare battery packs in my backpack just in case of emergencies, and now I'm so thankful that I thought ahead enough in that regard. Around the 3rd day, I was really feeling the exhaustion of the trail, so I decided to set up camp a bit early. Typically, I would have liked to find a designated camping site with other hikers, but I thought that a night choosing to disperse camp would be better for me then. I set up my small tent and got to relaxing. Around 8 p.m., the sun had begun to set and I was getting tired, so I put my book back in my bag and crawled into my tent for a long night's rest so I could feel refreshed for the morning. I checked the batteries in my lantern and then crawled into my sleeping bag. When I woke up, it was pitch dark and the sound of a night wind was slithering through the trees. I'm normally a deep sleeper, so waking up in the middle of the night was an odd occurrence. I instinctively began to move and reach for my lantern, but something told me to stop. It was a gut feeling, a sense of pure wrongness. I had never felt that way before in my life, but it felt so deeply primal that I had absolutely no choice but to remain completely frozen where I was. It didn't help that I had an overwhelming urge to go to the bathroom. I listened and waited. At first it was only the wind, but then I heard a barely perceptible rustle of movement through the grass right next to my head, separated only by the thin fabric of my tent. I'm not a small guy, so typically I wasn't afraid of most things. But it occurred to me then that whatever was on the other side of the tent couldn't be a wild animal. Wild animals sniffed, rustled. Even if they were being quiet, there was some indication of the fact that it was an animal. But this thing had made a sound despite deliberately trying to be quiet. I stayed still as stone, waiting for whoever it was to move along, but they didn't. I stayed still so long that I was wondering if anything had actually been there at all, until the clouds that were covering the moon parted themselves and a shadow painted the side of my tent. It was hard to make sense of at first because it was so low to the ground. Maybe it was a stick or a branch that had fallen and rolled to a stop beside the tent, and that's what had woken me up. It made perfect sense. I started to sit up, but the thing twitched what appeared to be a head in response. I froze again. Then I started to make it out. It was a person, on their belly in the grass, but holding themselves up by its hands and toes. Still as death. To hold yourself at that position for any length of time with just your hands, arms, and your toes would be difficult. but the way this person's shoulders seemed to collapse downward and the perceived ropiness of the muscles in the limbs. I swallowed, throat dry with panic. Its head twitched again, but unnaturally to the side this time. I heard a dull crack. Holding my breath, I continued to remain still as I possibly could while it listened. And then it moved in a way I could only describe as a slow loping towards the trees, remaining belly down on the ground the whole time. When I hadn't seen any shadows move for a long time, I gained the courage to move again. As I reached for one of my empty bottles to finally relieve myself, my mind raced at what the thing could have possibly been. I didn't want to consider what it truly looked like, so my brain started trying to rationalize any possible normal explanation. I'd rather delude myself than believe there was some kind of maniac crawling around in the Appalachian forest. It just wasn't normal, it wasn't right. I wanted to forget about the experience as soon as I possibly could, if I could at all. It's safe to say that I set out the next morning feeling exhausted and not a bit rested. I was beginning to pass fewer people the further into the forest I moved. I was incredibly thankful for interaction with others when I could get it, and I happily stopped to chat when they seemed willing themselves. The deeper I moved into the trail, though, I kept thinking I was seeing things. Through particularly dense patches of trees, I thought I saw movement of something between the branches, high up. I stared once or twice, and thankfully it turned out to just be birds, but I wasn't entirely sure. I decided that it would be best not to camp on my own anymore and would strictly keep to the designated camping areas and resupply points. Over and over my mind replayed the night that I saw them. And the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't accept the person on the ground to be a person at all. It looked like a person, but no decent person moved like that, and I'm not sure if somebody's body would even allow them to move like that, even after years of doing it to themselves. Either they would have had to have been moving like that since they were a child, or they were something else. Something not right. I'm not one to completely disregard the odd things in life, but I lean more towards rational explanation. I'm always willing to say that unexplainable things exist in a world as big as ours, but unexplainable things are only unexplainable until we find a way to figure it out. Was I just supposed to accept that there was some kind of inexplicable human being in the forest of Appalachia that crawled on the ground like an animal? Was it a spirit of some kind? A manifestation of a curse laid deep within the earth from the hearts and minds of a much older people? I don't know. I started thinking about the movie The Ritual a few times and had to completely push it out of my mind before I decided to turn around completely and quit the whole journey. I should have then. I know that now. When I made it to the next rest stop, there were a few people camping there, so I set up my tent farther away from the trees, close enough to others to be polite, and started a fire. Warm food usually helps everything in my experience, and I felt much better after I ate. I went to bed early, taking comfort in the sound of distant conversation and good-natured laughter, closing my eyes without a single thought of the thing in my mind. I now understand that what I experienced that night was a dream, but even now I'm not entirely sure that it was. I awoke to the sound of my name being whispered sharply at the foot of my sleeping bag, and when I opened my eyes, it was there, staring. There was only the extremely dim light from the moon coming through the tent fabric, but it was enough to provide a dull outline in the dark of the thing crouching inches from my feet. I remember my heart starting to pound and breathing rapidly through my nose as panic overcame me once again. I couldn't see its face, but I saw the suggestion of wide, hollow eyes in the shadows. It was speaking. It was saying the names of everyone I had ever known. My parents, my little sister, my best friend, my best friend's girlfriend, my co-workers, even my childhood best friend, and the names of the people I had once known in middle school. Names I no longer remembered. Its voice sounded like the whisper of leaves over dry bark, a light and horrible thing, insistent but sharp. I don't remember passing out, but I must have, because the next time I opened my eyes, I could hear the sound of other campers packing up their things to continue on down the trail. Cool, gray, dim light washed over everything in the tent, and I tried to ignore the sight of the muddy footprints at the foot of my sleeping bag. What was at first an exciting and positive experience had turned into something much more terrible. And as I walked through the forest, I no longer could recognize the beautiful landscape as being beautiful. All I saw were trees for the thing to hide behind, to watch me from. There were trees in all directions growing out of the earth in different angles. Deep copses and spiraling visions of ferns, bushes, and briar patches. It continued on and on. Every step I took, I knew I was moving even farther away from people. I was in the middle of it all now, and if I went back, I would be going back towards IT. For the next few nights, I stopped as frequently as I could at rest stops and camping grounds, hoping that I was moving further away from its territory. If it even had territory. One of the nights I remember being approached by a friendly-looking man and his dog as I sat with my back to the other campers facing the woods. I was sure I looked halfway to a madman then, my stubble grown into a patchy beard and my eyes framed with dark bags indicating poor sleep. The stranger's expression suggested he thought so too as I turned stiffly to acknowledge his greeting. "How is your hike going?" he asked me conversationally as his dog sniffed my hand that held the hot dog and bun I had just finished cooking. I managed a smile and tore off a piece to offer the dog, to which he accepted with the voracious appetite only dogs seem to have. "It's going well enough," I said, aware that my appearance indicated that it wasn't going well at all. "Are you attempting the whole trail?" he asked then, observing my face a little bit too much for my liking. "Yes, sir," I responded, nodding my head in the direction I came from. "Started from the entrance down in Georgia." He let out a sharp exhale in surprise. "You've made it farther than most, then." We talked about our experiences hiking before and how he was still a little bit of a beginner. But his wife, who had remained over by the campfire, had been doing it all her life. He invited me to sit with him for a while, and I accepted gladly, happy to be of decent company for the first time in days. And for the first time in a while, I didn't look into the trees searching for something that was looking back. As we talked into the evening hours, my new friend explained that he had hit his limit, and he and his wife were going to head back the way they came. "It's an intense experience." His wife had comforted him, patting his leg. "It's a huge commitment to take." I nodded in understanding, smiling sympathetically. He shrugged in slight embarrassment and scratched his cheek as he explained that he needed to work on his stamina training. They both were comfortable with the idea of attempting again maybe next year in the late spring. His wife told us both stories of how she would go hiking for hours in the local parks with her sisters when she was younger, and how she would see all kinds of wildlife. She had loved it so much that it became her hobby. "It's like a compulsion." She spoke hurriedly. "I have always naturally felt drawn to nature, but lately..." It occurred to me then to ask a question. I didn't want to ruin the mood of the conversation, which had been mostly, if not all, positive. But a part of my mind needed to be consoled in the potential fact that... "Have you seen anything weird on your trips through the Appalachian Trail?" I interrupted suddenly. They both fell immediately silent and looked at me with wide eyes. The dog pushed at my hand with his wet nose, and I rubbed his soft head to comfort myself. "Well," the wife said quietly, then trailed off. The man's eyes flicked to the entrance of the camp, and I swallowed deeply in regret. "I've seen some things," she said in a hushed voice. The man's leg began to bounce where he sat, and he bent forward, knitting his fingers together and staring into the fire. An odd sort of conspiratorial silence fell over us, as if we were the only ones who knew of what lived and crawled through these woods. Like what? I pushed. She seemed uncomfortable. It's not safe to talk about it here. So you've seen it? The woman pressed her lips together and refused to meet my eyes. The man continued to stare into the fire. It was all the confirmation I needed. I slowly sat back into my chair and rubbed the coarse hair along my jaw as I thought of going back with them. Safety in numbers, right? I brought up the idea nervously, and the two looked at each other briefly and then nodded in agreement. I felt much better then. That night I had no dreams and slept peacefully, knowing that the fear of being alone in this place would soon end with the company of experienced hikers. When I woke in the morning, I found them gone. They had left me a note next to my tent on a piece of what appeared to be sketchbook paper. In delicate cursive handwriting, the woman had written me a warning. "Trevor, I'm so sorry that we couldn't take you with us, but I need you to know why. The fact that you've seen what you think you've seen at all is enough for me to know that you've been marked. I need to protect myself and my husband, and bringing you with us would be putting us both at risk. What you have seen is something older than most of us alive, and I desperately urge you to call for an emergency extraction immediately. It has no name, but it hunts. I know it exists because it took my sister years ago and it was coming for me. Now it's been passed along to you. My life will be spared, but the price is steep. Please get out of these woods as fast as you can." I crumpled the note up and threw it over my shoulder. Enough was enough. I didn't need a crazy woman telling me I was being followed by something supernatural. What I needed was to get the hell out of here. I would heed her warning about leaving, but I wasn't going to let her tell me that I was being hunted by anything. It occurred to me then how stupid it was that I didn't bring a gun with me for safety. I remembered battery packs, but not a gun. Stupid. Stupid. As I packed up my things, I pulled out my map and compass and mapped a route to the nearest town by the trail. There I would be able to call for help if they had cell service, or if they had emergency services there. I wasn't going to die for pride. Finishing the trail meant nothing when it came to my place in my family's lives. There was absolutely no way I was going to risk that. I set off then, moving quickly along towards the nearest town. It was about 6 miles away, and I had plenty of time if I just stuck to the trails. The main rule of hiking is to never, ever leave the trails. Even if you think there's a shortcut in a certain direction, don't take it. The landscape of the forest looks so similar that you risk getting disoriented even a few feet from the path. Even if you think you have a great sense of direction, don't leave the trail. Ever. You have to understand that I had no choice. Around 2 hours after I left the campsite, I heard footsteps echoing behind my own. When I turned, there was no one there. I kept walking and the footsteps resumed. Against my better judgment, lack of sleep, and acute stress, I whirled around and screamed an empty threat into the thick, chokingly close trees. Nothing but silence answered me, and the knowledge that not even the insects were chirping in the grass. I began to jog up the trail, looking down at my compass periodically and not even bothering to look behind me anymore as the footsteps resumed in equal stride with mine. They were beside me, behind me, above me somehow. The tree branches rustled, and I could detect the faintest movement of a long white arm out of the corner of my eye. As I'm writing this now, I realized I need to rephrase what I wrote in the beginning. It isn't that it's someone following me, it's something. Usually you can feel a malicious intent from a person, an ill feeling, or a gut presence of want of harm. I feel nothing from this creature. It only wants. It stalks. It watches. It seems to be biding its time. It's certainly fast enough to overtake me, but this seems to be its way. Following, shadowing, watching, and waiting. The exhaustion is wearing on my mind and my body, and I can't move for much longer. Eventually, I'm going to run out of food. My feet are ruined in my hiking boots, and with every step, my legs burn. I think I'm close to where I want to be. The compass is reading the right direction. The light is fading, but the sound of pursuit has never slowed. I've seen its face. It has empty, wide eye sockets, staring from treetops, from behind bushes, around trees. Always at changing angles. How is it moving this fast? I don't understand it. Maybe that girl was right. I just hope that I can find somewhere with data so I can send